Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation. I'm your host, along with my co-host.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bonnie Snyder.
Hey. First off, as always, we really want to thank Rob and John and WeBeam TV for allowing us to be able to do this show. And if you guys want to help support us, you could go to our Kindest website, and there's all sorts of different levels of donation levels, from as low as $5 to cover a whole year. Would be cool. You can click on that QR code there in the bottom right-hand corner, and it'll take you right to the website. And we want to thank Kindest too for partnering with us for that. And we also have our T-shirts for our Purple Folder program. They're available through our website also. And you can click on that QR code, and you can order them directly from our T-shirt person, and they'll ship it all over the country. Or if you want to pick it up locally, it's Gulfside Custom T-shirts. They've been a great partner also for us. And also we do have some at the foundation office. So we have those available. So, and we're getting kind of sort of trying to get geared up for the fall for Art for Hope. And it's still going to be kind of virtual, but we're going to expand it a little bit virtually. So we're kind of, the event last year, we held it pretty much online. It was virtual, and we extended it from September 1st to the first Saturday in November, which is Suicide Loss Survivors Day. So we're going to do something similar, but instead we're going to kind of put it across 3 different platforms in a way. So we're still kind of working on that, but I had a local artist who wanted to donate a piece for Mental Health Awareness Month, which we just came through. And she did this awesome piece. Her name is Carol Smith, and she did this awesome piece, and she titled it really cool too. It's called Hope Rains Down. Let's see. Just trying to do it on here. It's a really cool piece of art. Hey, that looks kind of pretty good. It's a 20 by 20 canvas. It doesn't need to be framed. And we'll have this up on, it'll be on the Bobby White Foundation Facebook page, have its own little picture thing. And a way that you can participate is we're going to do it kind of like a silent auction style. And in the comments below where we make the post with the picture, that's where you put in the amount. And we're going to start the opening bid at $55, which is really good. And she titled the piece, Hope Rains Down.
Fitting for the show.
Isn't it fitting? It's a 20 by 20 fluid acrylic abstract painting on gallery wrap canvas. A base of turquoise was flooded on the canvas, then violet, magenta, Payne's gray, metallic copper, and 24 karat gold were randomly placed on top. Violet was then added to the top area and swiped down over the colors to form beautiful cells. And she signed the painting on the back. She's a local artist here, and we'll show it. We'll probably run it through the month of June, and so we'll show it on have it on our shows, and I'll each week give a little bit more information on the artist.
Nice.
So it'll be a good way to kind of ease into and kick off some fundraising, because, as you know, with all nonprofits, fundraising this year and a half has been really, really difficult. And this will be our 4th annual Art for Hope. And just because things still are kind of iffy, we're not really into having a complete in-person event this year. Plus, next year will be our 5th annual, and we have huge plans for that one.
Nice.
So
Can't wait.
That'll be
Can't wait.
really great. So, I think we're going to continue with our book.
I know we're going to continue with the book.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add before we continue with the book?
I think, anything to be added, when I think about, going through this chapter, and some of the things that it highlighted on, it's amazing how when we're doing the chapters, it seems coincidentally that what we're focusing on in the chapter happens to be going along with, what's going on in real life.
Real life, right.
Because this next chapter, talked about, some things, and it made me think about, certain anniversaries, certain days, and how we approach and navigate through grief and loss. So, I said, I was back in the Midwest. I think I shared that last week as well, but I was back in the Midwest, for one of my grandchildren's graduation. And, it was a bit surreal as we were looking at who would have graduated next. And, how, every year there's going to be a graduation, but we're gearing up to that one year that there's going to be a break, because
one person's going to be missing.
So, symbolically doing a graduation for him. And, thinking about that, it's, there's a paragraph in the book that, that talks about, normalizing things or, rituals and stuff. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and last week we did have Debbie from NAMI Pasco on for Mental Health Awareness Month, and that was really good. And she has been really great coming into our community and taking over as executive director for NAMI Pasco. They've really expanded their services and even awareness in our community, which has been great and really, really needed.
And I think, with Debbie being, in that role, there's certain, I look at personalities for different roles, and she is such the perfect personality for that role, with her compassion and, how she approaches things, very soft-spoken, very spiritual. And we were, again, we thank her for, taking time out of her schedule.
No, most definitely. And she comes from life experience also. So this chapter here is Setbacks and Solutions. Again, the book is Progressing Through Grief, which you can get on Amazon. And if you go through smile.amazon.com, you can choose the Bobby White Foundation as your charity of choice. I looked on my account the other day because I had ordered some stuff. I think I had this past maybe a little over a year, like 57 orders and donations towards the foundation.
Nice. So
I was like, oh, I've been ordering a lot off Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon is my go-to as well, and, so what I like about, what Amazon does as far as, nonprofits and, charitable donations is, I get it, especially in the times of COVID, people, are, stressed for cash, or I don't have, disposable funds to, donate to an organization or a nonprofit. And I think about it, guys, how many of us order from Amazon anyway? So it's not extra coming out. That's
right.
What I think was the beauty of it. It's not extra coming out. If it's
right,
if
and
you're
it's a passive way to support an organization, and you don't feel it. It's stuff you're going to buy anyway. I needed filters for my air conditioner because remember Maria from Williams and Son. It's getting hot, so we had to change our air filters, and I didn't feel like running to Lowe's, and I was like, I'll check Amazon. A couple of days, I had my filters, and I didn't have to run to Lowe's.
Exactly.
And made a donation to the foundation.
Exactly.
So anyway, Setbacks and Solutions. we go through this, and this is probably something that will happen on a continual basis for a long time. I had highlighted here, setbacks are happening so you can actively make changes. But you have to be a little bit self-aware of it too. And that comes with time. That's not something that's going to happen right away.
Yeah, and I like the way it talks about, during the grief process, that you find yourself navigating, multiple hurdles. I was in a meeting yesterday, and, as some meetings go, they're virtual, our meeting was virtual. And one of my coworkers, I don't want to say as coworkers go, but as we're in this virtual meeting, some of us has a tendency to text message back and forth to one another, whether it is a don't forget to mention this, or like some of us are timekeepers. You have 1 minute left. Hey, this is a reminder to move the meeting along. But anyway, it was a team meeting that we were in, and we were texting back and forth about make sure when the next segment comes up that we mentioned this. And the coworker, she had in her text, she had said, I'm not on my game today. What's going on? She had lost a dear friend to an overdose. Yesterday was the 3rd year anniversary of this friend's passing. And she said, it's the 3rd anniversary for Grace, and I'm trying to hold it together. And we're like texting back and forth. We got this. You got this. We got this. And something about the topic that we were talking about, during this team meeting, that came up. But anyway, in the course of the conversation, she made the comment to me, I would think that after 3 years, I would be over this, or I wouldn't react like I do. And I, text back, and she goes, I know if anybody on the team would understand that, you would. And I text her back, I do understand completely. There is no timeline, and this is a club that we don't want to be in. And I find, as we're looking at these hurdles and navigate some, we'll, talk a little bit in this first highlighted paragraph that she talks about grief roles, where, one of the roles, she talks about is, it's the caretaker. It's our business, or we make it our, maybe not, do I want to say business? But for some reason we find it necessary to take on this role where we're taking care of everybody else, and we forget to take care of ourselves. And so as I'm talking to this coworker, and it's like, it's okay, you got this. This is normal. Yes, I get it. I'm thinking to myself, and then I go and I read this chapter. I was like, boy, you were playing the caregiver yesterday. Like, you were really on that role. And not that I negated, understanding, or focusing on myself, or, taking time to process my own, thoughts and feelings. But it was, that seems to be my go-to role, is that caretaker. And it's like, it's okay on one hand, or, I moved my daughter this week, and, focusing on, to get her moved. She and her children, are camping at my house for a bit, until she gets, settled until her house is ready. But I'm like, all right, now I got to do this. Now I got to do this. And in my head, it's like, but don't forget to take care of you.
Exactly.
Don't forget, that, where, yes, it's okay to be mindful of other people's needs, not at the expense of your own.
Right. Well,
Right.
because if you do that, you're not going to be in the position really to even help somebody else.
Exactly.
And that's, really, really important. I find that a little bit with the foundation, and sometimes having to pull back, or even as we're working on Art for Hope, sometimes I have to pull back a little bit and let somebody else is going to come in and do this. Yeah, it's really important. Yeah, you hit right on with, and the caretaker one seems to be the biggest one. That people kind of fall into and forget to take care of themselves.
I find myself navigating through the three roles that she highlighted in the book. There's the caretaker, which again, admittedly, I'm guilty of being a caretaker. But then there's that rational person.
Mm-hmm.
And, this rationalizing, let's not show emotions, like I hear people say all the time, you're the strongest person that I know. And I'm thinking, you guys only, on one hand, I'm thinking, if you only knew, like what's going on inside my head, would you believe that, or would you think that if you understood where some of my thoughts were going? But all right, let's not show emotion. All right, let's process through this. Okay, let's make sense. I think we've talked about this before, making sense of the nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, I think at times we all go through all three of these roles.
Mm-hmm.
The emotional one, and I think a lot of times even that one that's something that people. I mean, for me, a lot. That's what they don't see, and that's when they're saying, "Oh, you're so strong," you're really handling this, and it's like, but you don't see me behind closed doors. You can fake it sometimes out in public, and even with family, but you go. I think you go through all those at different times, depending on what is actually happening that day.
Exactly. Which brings us to this last role, that role of the that emotional role. And I want to say, for me anyway, the emotional role is probably like, that's the low one on my totem pole. Like, caregiver, rational, I would be like,
get that way at the top.
The emotional one is not an easy one for me, because I stuff. I internalize a lot. But I do find sometimes that if there is an emotion that's displayed, oftentimes it's anger, and I have to I sometimes have to pull myself back and say, all right, Bonnie, where is the anger coming from? What is the anger a manifestation of what's going on in the moment, or is what's going on in the moment a mask for the fact that you're still processing grief?
You're going and anger is one of those stages.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, and then going back to the whole rationalization. We should be over this. It's been, coming up on, the second anniversary. We should be over this. It's been 2 years. And,
really, and I've talked to several people about this, because, a lot of people say that. And we sometimes think it to ourselves, and then other people say it to us. But I have found, and this, really thinking back, it happened in both cases with me. The second and third year were really the most difficult years. The first year, you're just kind of in a daze, and you get through it. You don't know how. I personally don't remember most of what happened the first year in either cases of losing both my husbands, but the second and third year were the worst. And that's when I went through the depression with Bobby, was during that time.
Yeah, I found with the emotion that there were times where, in the early days, I would walk down the hall, my home, at home, and I would expect to see Pat come out of his room. Or, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd, look at my bedroom door, and I expect to see, him coming in. Hey, Mom, I'm running to the store. Do you need anything? Or, falling asleep with my bedroom light on. and, woke up in the middle of the night expecting, like, my room light's on. Oh yeah, that's right. He's not here to turn it off. Um, even, to this day, I still find myself, but to my friend, my coworker who, was talking about, her feelings, regarding, the anniversary of her friend's passing, she said, I feel guilty. I feel guilty because I still talk about her. I feel guilty because I'm, I like, like process through. 1 minute I'm okay, the next minute I'm an emotional wreck, and I feel guilty for being emotional. It's been 3 years, and I'm like, there's another one of those emotional swings where, again, I should be over this. It's been 3 years. It's been 2 years. It's been 5 years. It's been, I'm like, guys, stop trying to put.
Yeah, you
you know,
can't put it in a box or in a timeline.
Mm.
It doesn't work, And I think one thing is we need to kind of realize is that there's never going to be a time.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that it's something that'll go on. It may ease a bit, but it doesn't matter if it's 2 years or 5 years. It's always going to be there.
It is.
And not to be so hard on yourself, and don't let others insinuate their beliefs, to make it be hard on yourself.
And that's a nice segue into her next section where she talks about those destructive beliefs,
Right.
These thoughts that tell us how we're supposed to behave, how we're supposed to react to things.
She says right here, some people believe they should be feeling better already or beat themselves up when they start to feel better with the belief that they must not have cared about the person. And that's just not true. And some of these beliefs might be influenced by the things people are saying to you after the loss, sending you messages about how you should grieve. And you can't let people do that.
And, the other, statement that she has in there where she talks about, there are times that people will judge your grief and how you're processing it to the way they process it and term it in terms of good and bad. And I remember sharing at a family member, because, again, shortly after, after I lost Pat, it's like a continual basis. I would post something on my Facebook page, social media. I can't believe he's gone. Why is this? Or I would just continually post things about, if he were here, this would be this. And I remember this family member telling me, stop. You need to stop. You have 2 other children who are still alive, that are not gone. And, almost as if my telling that by me posting continually about their brother was subliminally sending a message to them that they didn't matter. That, the only thing that I cared about was Pat, the fact that he was gone. And, I had to think about it, because, I've had family members who lost someone, and it was like as soon as the service was over, it was almost like, okay, buried, done. Let's move on. And, I remember, telling this family member, I understand, I can understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it. I don't process like you do. I can't, just, it's almost like, here's the death. It happened. You process through this. You process hearing about the death. Then you go through the what you need to do to plan the service, and then the service happens. It's almost like that service is supposed to be the door that closes on the grief, the feeling of loss, the And all the other things that goes along with this person is physically not here anymore. And, again, I'm like, oh, can't process yours like you process me. Don't look at it in terms of good or bad. And then, again, I remember sharing how in the past, how, I would approach people in terms of, talking to them about grief, and I've used those cliche statements. They're in a better place. They wouldn't want you to be, they wouldn't want you to be sad. I'm going to take that one off the table for a minute, but they're in a better place. You have to go on. They're not suffering anymore, and the ones. But I think the one I'll focus on most is they're in a better place. And again, for like the umpteenth time, I remember telling Kira, those things I said to you was the stupidest thing I ever said in my life. It's like, I can't believe I said that to you. Because it does, experiencing loss of certain people. Like when my grandparents passed away. Okay, they were old. Lived a full life. Granddad was more expected than grandmom, but my grandmother was in her late 90s. When she passed, it was like, okay, she had a full life. Losing, hearing of friends, and that we were lost in the service. Right? We're in a war zone. Okay, one friend, caught in a crossfire. Right? You expect this. You grieve the loss of that person. It's very different. And it's very different, each loss. And even to compare your own individual losses to, well, wait a minute now. When this person passed away, I seem to get over it, or I dealt with that, or I processed that one really easy. Why is this one harder? And some people are like, oh, that was your child. Or even, doing a comparison between losing Aiden, losing Patrick, grandson to son. Why is this one more or less significant than the other, or, more or less painful than the other, or are they the same? The situation is different. The loss is different. The distance is different. Patrick was my roommate. Aiden is 1,200 miles away. What can I do? So again, you can't, there's no template that tells us how and when to grieve, and thus this habit that we all, and again, I would say we're all guilty of it, in terming things of good and bad, even for ourselves. I shouldn't feel this way anymore. It's been 2 years. I should be over this. I'm so worried about, to my friend, I'm so worried about offending other people or having other people be upset with me because I keep talking about this loss. I'm like, talk about it as much as you need to.
You have to. Even with the losses of my two husbands,
Mm-hmm.
both were very different.
Mm-hmm.
Both were tragic. Going through the loss of my first husband, kind of, which I was young. I was 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of set me up, which is kind of a weird way to say it, for this loss. This one was much harder for this time. We were together for almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
But when I lost my first husband, I was very young, and when you're that young and lose your spouse, you don't have a lot of peers, people around you that have had a loss like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's much different. Of course, then with Bobby's loss, being the situation that it was, is much different. But going through the time period per se, I can talk to myself and say, hey, remember it took you, you went through this, and and it wasn't a short period of time,
Mm-hmm.
even back then. You know, probably it was, even with my first husband, it was a good 5 years before I got my head on straight. And I had Bobby at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't married. We didn't get married until about a little over 5 years after Michael had passed. Um, but so I I tend to be a little bit easier on myself because of having that prior experience, and but even still having people say, "Oh, it's been 3 years. You need to get over it." And it's like, "Excuse me, you know, you grieve your way, I grieve mine."
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah.
And she, next section where she talks about those self-defeating behaviors that we tend to, find ourselves in, um, and like any other way that we process these behaviors look different. Um, for me, one of the main ones is the coulda, shoulda, wouldas.
Mm-hmm.
And that, we tell people, when we're dealing with, any kind of situation, from, a uh, therapeutic perspective, those coulda, shoulda, wouldas, that is distorted thinking. It is not healthy. It doesn't help anything. And, you go through this, there's that tendency that we have that you might go through this process of, while you're doing the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and you're like, oh, that's distorted thinking. That's, you know, come off of it. That's not going to change. At the same time, it's like, but how do I dispel, feeling that way? How do I, going back to rationalize the coulda, shoulda, wouldas? Yeah. Well, wait a minute now. Is it normal? And I would say it is where it might, on one hand, be understandable and necessary, and we'll use that word, quote unquote, normal, to what if this would have happened? What if this? What if that? What if that? Where, if I use Aiden, for example, what if I never moved to Florida? Would he still be here? What if, the friend that he sent the picture to right before it happened? What if that friend would have showed the picture to her mom, and her mom in turn would have sent a text message to, Kira, you need to go check on Aiden and make sure he's okay. We just got this picture. What if, and it's like with those things that happen, they weren't meant to happen. When I, think of Patrick, and going to, these, the self-defeating behaviors of, the anger and blaming other people, putting, focusing on, someplace else, where I asked myself, there were a couple of neighbors who, when they found out that he was gone, I just saw him Saturday night. This would have been, the day before he passed. And Patrick had this thing where he had, maybe I'll bring them in one time, but he had these light sticks, or these, little neoprene balls that lit up. But he could do like a finger twirl with them, where, he just twiddled these balls. And at night, it was amazing because it looked like this light show. But, he would just, twiddle. And one of the neighbors looked at me and said, I saw him Saturday night. And he was, he paced a lot. So he would walk, around the neighborhood, just, doing I want to say, clearing his head, this nightly walk. Something was off about him. And I asked him, was he okay? And he was like, yeah. But something seemed off. At work, a couple of his coworkers said, yeah, he came to work, but something was off. And in my head, I'm like, if one of you guys would have said, hey, Pat, are you okay? Or what's going on? There's something off. Would that have made a difference? And again, going back to, you can't blame them. Don't fall into that trap of, if you would have done such and such and so and so, maybe this would have happened. I found myself, as I'm, processing, the self-defeating behavior. Do I blame, the mom of his two younger kids? If you would have just let him, seeing the children instead of being, and I hate going here, being petty, because he missed his children. Do I blame, the the woman that he was in the relationship with right before, he passed away for just, I'm going back to Kansas, no warning, just going back to Kansas. I'll be back. She has a child, who's in Kansas. I'll be back. But, the trip back was, like I said, no plan, no warning. Well, wait a minute now. It's your fault. If you would have never left. You know what I mean?
And that's one of her things, scapegoating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Blame, and that it kind of goes. Those two kind of go together in a way. We also had this, similar things. If I would have known some things that had been happening, would I have left him at that moment?
Mm-hmm.
My sister-in-law was going to stop by that morning, and she was just kind of like on autopilot and went through the light. She drove by and realized, I was going to stop by, and I'll do it another time. But the person that she speaks to, because that was something that weighed heavy on her, and he told her that if he didn't do it that day, he probably would have done it another day.
Right, and Carl has, if you remember when we had Carl on, and he had made that comment, if we would have found him, did we delay, would we have delayed the inevitable by a month? Would we have delayed it by a day? Would it have been, okay, not this year, maybe next year? Would it have, would it have stopped? And we don't know the answer.
No, it's an answer that you'll never know. And that's what makes it so hard with second guessing yourself,
The other thing she talks about is avoiding and minimizing, your emotions. And again, it's that, process of, I don't want to feel this way, so I'm not going to allow myself to feel this way. I might be feeling things at a level 10, but I'm going to portray, again, going back to my coworker of yesterday, she's like, every once in a while, when my camera goes off, because again, we were in a virtual meeting, she goes, I turn my camera off because I just find myself, like bursting out in tears and crying. And then I dry my tears and then turn the camera back on, and I'm like, wow, this minimizing, the emotion of what we're feeling behind this loss. And in my head, I'm thinking, if you made the comment, if you sent a text message to our supervisor, hey, got to jump off for a moment, I'm struggling, our coworker knew, the woman who passed away. I need to jump off for a minute. I'm having a moment. She would have been like, fine.
Right.
Jump back on, or, go ahead. But this, I don't know, this feeling or this process that some of us go through, where if I feel a certain kind of way, there's guilt associated with feeling that way. And, so now not only do we find ourselves grappling with, I'm grieving, I'm in pain, this hurts, this sucks, to, oh my gosh, and now I'm guilty because now what I'm feeling, what I'm dealing with is now projected over to you. And now you have to deal with, what I'm dealing with, and how, is that fair to you? So I'm gonna push it down. I'm gonna minimize.
Yeah, and I think that, over the years, it's a societal thing that, we have been kind of raised that way in a way. And it goes back into all, pushing down and not addressing the mental health. It's, you just push it aside and let's just not deal with it. And And look where it's got us. You know?
Which is interesting. She talks about here in their section perfectionism. We have to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to be, you know, things have to be exact, you know, like the stars and the moon need to be aligned in the exact same way, in the exact way that we think they should be aligned, and when they're not, you know, that is problematic. You know, that's, you know, one of those, you know, self-defeating behaviors. Guys, we're not perfect.
No, we're human.
Exactly.
For a reason.
And it's okay not to be perfect. Or, you know what? Embrace the perfection that you are. You know, like you could be perfect without displaying perfectionism, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, it's, yeah. And that also kind of is, you know, it's rationalizing, you know. And the rationalizing goes in a couple of ways. You're trying to rationalize your feelings and what you're trying to do, but then also trying to rationalize the situation. What happened? Why did it happen? In our cases, most of the time, we'll never know. And you can't rationalize something that you'll never know.
No, absolutely. You know, and, you know, she talks about, you know, the problem solving where I'm going to ignore, you know, or stuff what I'm dealing with by solving everybody else's problems.
Mm.
You know, so it's, you know.
I can't do that. I can't solve my own.
Well, you know, and it's funny because, you know, it becomes an issue of, and again, it was another coworker that I was talking. Of course, in our line of work, it's kind of like, yeah, well, let's swap stories here. But another coworker of mine, you know, we were chatting, and, you know, we were talking about this inability to say no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, there's a project over here that needs to be done. I'll do it. And it's like, wait a minute, you need to slow down and take care of you. There's another project over here going, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, hey, we've got this situation. Hey, I got it. I'll take care of it. You know, after a while, it's like, wait a minute. You know,
It's avoidance.
it is avoidance. You know, it's like it's a combo of avoidance and this need to problem solve.
Right.
I need to fix. If I could, you know, if by somehow I could fix what's going on with everybody else, I can, by default, fix myself. So I'm living vicariously
Right.
through this
Doesn't
fixing
work.
to fix, like I'm broken. So in order to fix what's broken in me, I have to fix what's over here, you know, and unfortunately, you know, again, she talks about it here. That's not always the case. We can't fix ourselves through other people.
No, you can't. It doesn't work. And that's, you know, problem solving. You know, you need to slow down and focus. And she says it right here: slow down and focus on your needs instead of trying to fix things.
How many of us isolated?
Oh, I can do that easily. You know, you may not, people that know me, but I mean, you may not think it because I'm doing this show, but I am really an introvert, and I can be home alone, and my husband and I were that way together. We enjoyed just our own company. We didn't have to be out socializing all the time or anything like that, which in a way was good, kind of in a weird roundabout way, prepared me for this situation. But and like with COVID, that's fine. I can stay home. I got plenty to do, but you do have to be careful with that, because sometimes you don't want to be alone for so long with your own thoughts, because they can start getting kind of weird.
You know, and I find there's a difference between having an introverted personality and isolating. Because, you know, like you, I'm very much an introvert. You know, people are like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, this mask is working. Yeah, it's like, you guys, you know, obviously, what I want you all to see, it's working. But being, when I think of people like, okay, like us who are introverts, it is not that, we're antisocial, that we are avoidant. It's just, what, I'm fine, like you, being at home alone, doing whatever it is I'm doing around the house. At the same time, needing to be careful that peace, and comfort that I found being, introverted and, solo doing my own thing, that it did not become the extreme of isolation. You know, when, we're dealing with grief, we'll find, in the beginning, people want to come over and take care of us. Let's and again, if I use my situation, hey, we're gonna come over and make sure that you're eating. We're gonna make sure that you're not alone. We want somebody with you there all the time. And in my head, I'm like, I understand what they're doing and I appreciate this. On the other side of it, it's like, please get out of my house. I want to be alone. And it was like, do I want to be alone because I'm okay being in my house by myself, or do I want to be alone because I'm isolated?
Right.
And I'm glad that I did not allow myself to be forceful and kick people. Get out, just get out. And kick people out and just okay, I get it. They're looking out for my well-being. Now, what happens oftentimes where, isolation, does become an issue is, we have this attention, people are not letting us, be by ourselves, event is over, fast forward, to the, like, I'm going to call it after the service. It's like, all right, got them, you got through the death, you got through the service, you got through, the initial shock. Now it's time to move. It's time to move on. How many times do people hear others say, "I'll be with you. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call. You don't have to do it by yourself. Just call me. I'm going to check on you periodically." And I'm not. What's the phrase the children use nowadays? I'm not throwing shade on anybody. At the same time, it's like, how many of you who said, I'm going to check on you periodically, or you're not going to be alone, life, has gone back to normal.
And that's what happens. Life goes back to normal for everybody else, and it doesn't for us. And it happened to me too. Actually, in both situations. But she does say here, it is important to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
After such a loss, so that you can fully engage in your own grieving
Right.
process. But it is also important to reach out for help with a positive support system. And like with me, some of the people that have gone by the wayside, which I didn't think would,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's kind of the way of the not so positive people not being there.
I also find, when it was, for me personally, there's times where it's hard for me to reach out to other people.
I think it is for most people, and that's the one thing is, and I've heard it from several resources, is that if you're the person on the other side, and you want to help somebody, just do it. Don't say, hey, if you need me, call me. Or if you want some help, call me. If you know that there's a need for that person, just reach out to him and do it. Don't wait for us to do it, because chances are, most likely we won't.
Oh, exactly. What I find too...
Because I think, to me, I feel like I'm being a burden on somebody.
You took the words out of my mouth. When I think about Oh, let me use the example. Greg and Jennifer, who were guests on our shows some time ago, you know, the for lack of a better word, I'm call it the challenge they have with their daughters. You know, two, you know, daughters, you know, suffering from the same, you know, illness, and you know, um, it's a heavy load for them. You know, and again, I'm like, how do you guys do it? I don't. You know, of course, it's you know their strong faith. But I find, you know, periodically we're, you know, checking on each other, you know, how are you doing? How are you doing? And I sit back and I'm like, mine was a loss, you know, and mine is you know, a mind and physical pain that is, I don't want to say, I hate to, I don't want to put it in terms of it's not a constant. Um, you guys are, you know, you guys, your challenge is there every day, and you have the two of them. And, you know, that's burden of, well, if I reach out to them and say, hey, I need you to say a prayer for me, or hey, you know, and I'm like, why am I putting my stuff on you when you're already dealing with what you're dealing with, you know, and vice versa. There were other people, you know, again, that it's like, you know, going back to my coworker, you know, conversation from yesterday, I don't want to feel as if people are thinking I need to get over it. I don't want to feel as if I'm a burden. You know, and again, I think it's important as, you know, people, as, you know, we navigate through grief, is to understand that reaching out for help is okay. Sometimes us offering assistance or reaching out to someone else who might be struggling is the very thing that we need to help us with, you know, careful not to fall into that caregiver role.
Right.
You know, well, at the same time, hey, while I'm helping you, I'm also helping myself.
Right. Well, and that's kind of like what we're doing here, you know. And while we're talking about reaching out to people, for several months ago, I have this 20-foot flagpole in front of my house, and the rope broke. And I had reached out to some people several months ago, and I've had several people wanting to saying, "Oh yeah, we'll come and fix it." I finally got the rope. I got a new, really nice American flag, and I got a brand new Lightning flag, you know, for our Tampa Bay Lightning. Had it all ready, and things just kept falling through. So last week, I just finally I was like, just do this. And so I put on my Pasco that, you know, I'm a widow of a Vietnam veteran, and I wanted to get this up by Memorial Day weekend and mention the foundation. And I want to give a shout out to Steve Farrell from Team Farrell and Farrell Cares, because within less than 24 hours, he was out on my property with his big machine and another guy, and they had strung my flagpole, and my flags are
nice.
up. And he actually contacted me almost immediately after I had made that post. And within an hour, he was like, okay, we'll be out there tomorrow afternoon. And like I said, by 12:30 the next day, Friday afternoon, my flagpole was strung.
Nice.
So we got the Lightning flag for the Tampa Bay Lightning flying high, along with the American flag. And I reached out to, we're going to have a Bobby White Foundation flag made. And so when we don't have the sports teams flying, the foundation flag will be flying. And that flagpole is actually right in front of the house, where the front office is right there.
Nice.
So, and I put some new lights on it, so you can see it at night. So I really wanted to thank Steve Farrell for coming out and doing that, because it is sometimes it's hard for us to ask for help, but there was no way I could string this 20-foot pole at all. So,
you know, and you know, to, you know, end the show on that note is, you know, the constant reminder that, you know, there are always places that you can go for help. You know, you know, we have the Popa folder that has the resources in it. there are, organizations like NAMI.
And we focused on NAMI Pasco, but NAMI is all across the country.
Right, right.
And
But again, there's NAMI. There are multiple mental health agencies to reach out to. There are multiple agencies that provide grief counseling. There
well,
are.
and we had on the show couple of weeks ago, Veterans Helping Veterans
Vet Helping Vet.
in Tampa Bay. So, and there's always the national hotlines that you can call. The suicide prevention hotline. You call that number and press 1. That's for veterans. So there is help, and sometimes you might feel like you're isolated and it's hard to find, but reach out to people close to you, and they'll get you the help.
Absolutely.
They will get you the help.
Absolutely.
So we again want to thank Rob and John from WeBeam TV. And we want to thank you guys for tuning in. And remember, too, that what we're talking about here, this grief process, isn't limited to suicide.
Absolutely. A loss is a loss.
You can go through this with us no matter what kind of loss you've had. Remember, there's always hope.